welcome to our next installment, or our newest installment, latest, whatever you want to call it, of Pabst Mansion Presents. I'm John Harry, hosting this evening. We have an excellent talk coming up about Pabst Farms from our friends at the Waukesha County Historical Society. Their executive director, Bonnie Byrd, will be joining us in just a couple minutes here. Just want to kind of give you a clue into what's going on at the Pabst Mansion right now. We've been undergoing quite the extensive remodeling project to do with rewiring pretty much the entire house, the electrical systems, which is great for safety and the longevity of the organization. And those projects are set to wrap up here shortly, meaning that we will be reopening soon at the Pabst Mansion. So we'll let you know the opening date, as well as when you can come by and see the place. The good news about the renovations is we did it right, and you shouldn't even notice that anything happened, right? Hopefully, there I am back again. Internet fun things today, but hopefully you can come by and see us. We do have a talk coming up in just a bit in a couple weeks here on April 8th with our friend John Eastberg. We're partnering with the Milwaukee County Historical Society on that talk, Captain Pabst Beyond the Brew House, and we hope you can tune into that April 8th, 7:30. If you're tuning into this talk, then you already know how to be there for that talk. But the point of tonight is to learn about cows, and specifically the Pabst Farms area in Oconomowoc and Waukesha County, with Bonnie Byrd, the executive director with the most alliterative name, and you guys have quite the fun exhibit that you just launched at the Historical Society in Waukesha, too.
We do. And actually, hearing you talk about the electrical, we underwent our own building renovation, so my sympathies go out to surviving that type of infrastructure build, but it's so worth it at the end. But yes, we just opened our latest special exhibition for the year, The History of Waukesha, the city in 100 objects. Our exhibit logo there, the city is celebrating 125 years as a city. Incorporated in 1896. And so we worked last year. It gave us something during the strange times that were 2020 that felt very productive. So it is officially open. You can check out that exhibit at the museum. We're open Thursday and Friday afternoons and then Saturdays. And there's also an online portal that you can check those things out, kind of get a sneak peek at what those objects are on display.
Cool. Well, that sounds awesome. And tonight's talk is something that relates heavily to the Pabst family. And if anybody has any questions, just pop those in the comments. I see we already got spammed here with some guy, so that probably doesn't exist. So I'm going to delete all those. But if you have real comments and questions and stuff, Bonnie will do a Q&A at the end. But I'll let Bonnie take it from here and have fun with Pabst Farms.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So really, this program, when John reached out to me and asked if there was a partnership opportunity, it struck me that as we're looking to what's next for us, focusing on the agricultural history of Waukesha County is high on our agenda, and that Pabst family does very obviously fold into expanding that for us. And so tonight I'm going to be talking about Pabst Farms that was established in the western part of our county, and also what made Waukesha County USA. It was not a moniker we gave ourselves, I will say. It was bestowed upon the region. But this billboard is one of my favorite images from the early 20th century from our photography collections, advertising that when you entered Waukesha County, you entered the county of cows, with these two lovely ladies in their 1930s Sunday best. They were actually part of an ad campaign by the Waukesha County Holstein Breeders Association to be photographed in front of this sign to help attract folks into the region. But we will get into all of that as we dig into the program here this evening. So certainly cannot start the program without acknowledging the Fred Pabst that we will be following tonight. This image coming from the Pabst Mansion collections. You see Captain Frederick Pabst there on the left. In the middle, Frederick August Pabst, the young chap that he is, and then Frederick Pabst Jr. on the right. And it's Frederick Pabst Jr. who really we are going to follow this evening. His work to establish really this new business for the Pabst family moniker, that being the Pabst Farms. His tenure in Waukesha County dates from about 1906-07 through the 1950s then. And so he tracks very much with some of the broader historic themes that I look to when we tell the larger history of Waukesha County. Kind of the first generation being from 1846 when Waukesha and Milwaukee counties split apart. That first generation lasting 50 years or so then, getting us to near the turn of the century. And of course, then Fred Pabst again, really 1906 when he first starts to purchase land out in the western part of the county. And so we'll follow his tenure, the farms, what drew him to the region where he does establish Pabst Farms, and why ultimately he becomes one of the leaders for, in particular, Holstein dairy herds, not just in the county, not just in the country, but across the world. But first, how in the world did Fred, the son of Captain Pabst, decide to come out to the western part of Waukesha? And so first we've got to understand a little bit about what's going on in the region at the turn of the 20th century. Waukesha is still in the heights of a major tourist boom. The city of Waukesha has earned a reputation as the Saratoga of the West, the city of springs, and by extension, the Lake Country region has become a major resort destination, attracting folks from certainly the Southeast Wisconsin region and Chicago, but also from the deep south in some instances. There are trains running up from Alabama, Louisiana, bringing folks into our cities here in Waukesha County. And for the Pabsts, they are part of a newly rich population here in the States. And so for them, they're looking for country homes. And like many others, they find the Lake Country of Western Waukesha County to be a very attractive locale to build country estates potentially. For Fred Pabst Jr., also yacht racing. You can see in the postcards here on the screen, one of the grand estates, in this case, the Valentine Estate, that was built in Oconomowoc, and then below a postcard of a regatta on Loch LaBelle there in Oconomowoc as well. And then to bring folks out into the region, you saw those railroads as well as light rail, but also these stage coaches. Fred Pabst and his brother Gustav actually helped to create a coach line that would take they and their friends and folks they were entertaining out and into the Lake Country. The photograph here that you see is actually in front of the Edgemoor, which was one of the Pabst family's real estate holdings. It's one of their tied house properties. It wasn't just saloons or taverns that were part of Tied House. You would also see breweries like Pabst that owned hotels, stage stops like this one. This photograph has also been the cause of some debate amongst our archival folks in trying to date it. We think that perhaps the folks on top of that stage are part of a fancy dress party, that their dress is kind of out of the period that the photograph's actually from, but a fun detail there. But part of why the Pabst brothers are able to run a stagecoach is the Pabst family interest in horses. The Pabst brewery, of course, well known for their Percheron horses. And so initially the family's interest in establishing a farm is for horse stock, is for Percheron as well as Hackney horse breeding. And they initially purchased land in Waukesha. And that initial farm kind of whets Fred Jr.'s appetite for getting into farming and agribusiness really more heavily. Again, just situating ourselves in terms of where we're talking about when we're talking about the lake region of Waukesha County. This map was produced by one of the rail lines that would bring folks out, the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway. As you look across this map, then you are looking north. So starting on the right, you've got Pewaukee Lake, working your way across then for Fred Pabst. He ultimately is going to establish his farm in what is green space on the left portion of this map image that you see here. And again, it is interest in horse stock that is really driving Fred Pabst's interest in establishing his own farm. Again, for the brewery's purposes, but at the turn of the 20th century, horsepower, very literal horsepower, is necessary for any number of industries. Images here taken from our collections. One show a team out on one of those lakes in Lake Country as part of an ice hauling team. Even though refrigeration technologies have begun to be adopted, there is still a high demand for ice in brew houses like the Pabst brew house, as well as for home use and for refrigeration in train cars, even transporting. And so having a strong team like a Percheron team or a Hackney team of horses in order to haul those loads, still very much a necessity for that industry, and also for delivery. Here then on the right, you see a delivery wagon, kind of a hybrid wagon truck. This coming from 1943, so decades into the 20th century, still seeing horse-driven, horse-powered delivery, although there is a rise, certainly, of automotive influence that will affect Fred Pabst's horse breeding program. But Fred decides to enroll after his marriage to his wife Ida. He decides to enroll in about 1905, 1906 in the University of Wisconsin-Madison short course agriculture program. And that really was his introduction to formal farm management, introducing him to some of the most modern thought processes behind how to establish a farm, what the operation should look like, where there was really, at the end of the day, money to be made. And so it is between that short course program, his knowledge of available land in Lake Country, and his access to funds that allow him to start purchasing land for what becomes more than 1,400 acres of Pabst Farms. So specifically, the map here is Summit Township, but you can see there Oconomowoc Lake, as well as then the city of Oconomowoc that really straddles between Summit Township and Oconomowoc Township proper. Where Fred Pabst ends up finding his best land opportunity are in sections 11 and 14 on the map. So if you find Oconomowoc Lake and kind of follow south, you'll see again, sections 11 and 14, and he ends up purchasing land in the southern part of section 11 and in almost the entirety of section 14 as well. This map is coming from the early 1870s. I've superimposed then this map coming from 1930, and now you see, again, sections 11, sections 14, where Fred Pabst's name is now appearing through those sections. Those properties are what we know now as Pabst Farms. One of the other interesting features that shows up then on this 1930 map is that black and white dotted line. That is the Milwaukee Electric Light Rail that actually ends up bisecting his farm property. He'll end up kind of utilizing that access point, but that was not necessarily a known feature when he first started purchasing his land. The other interesting thing, and I've almost cropped him out because he's not our focus here tonight, but in the bottom left of the superimposed map, you can just see Gustav Pabst's name appearing there below his brother's claim of land. So Gustav also purchased land. For him, it was more the result culture, the lake house culture that he was looking for, versus Fred Pabst, who really looked to develop a significant portion of land for agricultural investment. And again, initially his focus is on the horse lines and following what's sometimes referred to as a model farm program. The idea of a model farm was becoming more and more popular at the turn of the 20th century. And it was both in the United States as well as Europe, an opportunity to both adopt scientific advancements in farm management, new understandings around kind of closed system raising of livestock, whereby you would raise the grain and feed that you then needed for your horses or for your hogs, and that you would really specialize in what you were producing. Fred Pabst, too, looks at developing not just one main farm site, but actually ends up locating 7 different farms. He numbers them, farm 1, farm 2, etc., and along the perimeter of his property. Of course, one of the most significant structures that he adds to his land is a house for he and his wife and their children. The house earns the name Woodbine. It's seen here in the 19 teens. This is actually the rear of the house. And it gets its name actually from the vines that you see appearing, starting to crawl up the house. But construction for the house as well as the main farm buildings begins in 1907. So this is after Fred has completed that short course at UW-Madison and really has a plan for how he wants his farm to come together. He has at this point too officially retired from the brewery so that he can focus on this new investment. He does employ, though, an architect that had worked with the family before, that being Max Furnix, and they engage in a rather unusual construction in terms of material. For those who've been staring closely at the house, it looks a bit as though it may be a stucco or a kind of Southwest inspired. It's actually a concrete house. Fred embarks upon a plan of construction of poured concrete for his structures. Now, in researching and reading about the construction of the house, as well as the other farm properties, this next image is from farm number 1, a significant L building that had dormitories as well as an enclosed arena. There are a number of reasons that you may look to a concrete construction type. One of them was the ability to pour into forms and really create precisely the dimension and shape of structure you're looking for. Another consideration, especially for farm structures, is that concrete is much more fire resistant, than a wood frame-based structure would be. Fire certainly always a risk in any farming operation, especially when you have significant silage, that being grain storage or hay. Those in storage can retain a significant amount of heat, can lead to combustion, as well as then accidental fire starts that may have occurred. Again, the image we're looking at now is coming from farm number 1. Same period as the house image. As I mentioned, this had dormitories for the farm hands, as well as a small lounge and library for them to use. And part of the L coming off then was an enclosed arena. The specifications on construction in some instances have called for concrete up to 1 foot thick. If anyone has ridden in an indoor arena in a Wisconsin winter, having a thick-walled arena will only help. It gets very cold in arenas in the winter. It's a lot of open space. And so, too, the concrete construction allowed for Fred to envision and execute for very large spaces that didn't necessarily need the same internal supports interrupting the large span of space. Other significant features that became landmarks right away were these 2 silos. They were actually on farm number 5. Between them, 550 tons of silage storage for the farm. Again, Fred created individual farm units around the perimeter of his property. Farm 5, where these silos were, along with farm 4, were home to a small Holstein herd at first. Other farms along the property then kind of specialized in different areas. Farm 1 also had some of the dairy operations, but it was also the main headquarters. That's where that dormitory building was, where the horse arena was. Farm 2 had Shropshire sheep. I have practiced saying that. Farm 3 had the largest number of buildings that were really the support buildings for operations across all the farm properties. The farm manager's house, there was a 200-foot-long horse barn, a dairy barn, feed mill, granary, blacksmith shops, machine shops. And the final farm then, the final farms, farms 6 and 7, came online a bit later. They became sites where Pabst would partner and essentially kind of bring on tenant farmers to run their own small farm units within the larger farm operations. The other image you see here then, again, getting at in this model farm concept, it's from fallow field on up. So the caption we had for this photograph was adding lime onto the ground, anticipating planting. So they were raising grain for their livestock. There were also chickens on the farm, single comb leghorn or single comb chickens. So a whole diversity of farm operations. But ultimately, it's Holsteins that become the primary focus for the farm's efforts, and also the most significant opportunity for the farm to, one, be profitable, but also, as I said earlier, really remake and in many cases make the Holstein bloodlines across the country and in some cases across the world through sale. So you can see here displayed several of the Holstein milking cows from the farm. Holsteins, of course, recognizable by their black and white patterning. One of the things I really enjoy about this image, as you look at it, you'll start to see where all the farmhands are crouched down between the legs of the cows as to hide out of the picture. But really, the other thing on display here for milking dairy is the fact that you can see the udders on the cows and how, one, the volume potential that this stock herd had, but also how healthy and pronounced those udders are. The shift for Fred Pabst really comes in the 19 teens. He initially purchases about 50 head of Holstein cattle from another farm in Delafield, just a bit outside of Summit where his farm is. But it's a small 50 head herd. It's not a significant milking herd, but it's just enough that because he's interested in exploring. And he decides on Holsteins. This is a quote that comes to us from him, that after careful consideration and comparison with other breeds, he found that they were the, quote, most economic producers, especially considering the products such as milk, butter, and cheese, as well as the fluid milk for direct consumption. This fact, together with the better and more valuable carcass, as well as the value of the breeding stock for resale, soon convinced me, from a strictly business standpoint, the Holstein was the most profitable animal to buy. So again, 1908, 1909, we see this small herd starting on the farm, and there's an interrupting force then. What really helps sway the decision away from horse stock line to Holstein line is a new horsepower, the automobile. Although Fred certainly continues his interest in horse breeding, the rise of the internal combustion engine, not just for vehicle transportation, but also for farm work, the introduction of tractor into farm work really diminishes the demand for his Percheron and Hackney stock. In March of 1915, Fred Pabst auctions the majority of his equine stock and turns his focus to his Holstein breed line, producing dams like this lovely milking cow and sire stock, bull stock. For farm management, for herd management, having strong, well-documented bloodlines, I say strong in the sense of both the physical characteristics for your sire and for your dam, but also strong in the sense of they are well-documented, because maintaining a diverse bloodline was very important to the successive generations. If you do not keep good track of the strength of the line of heraldry for each sire, for each dam, there is a risk of introducing poorly bred animals, especially milking cows, that are not going to produce at as high of rates, that are not going to birth calves that are as healthy for market. And so Fred Pabst makes his reputation as a farmer on the strength of his Holstein heraldry lines. But he's not doing this just anywhere. He's doing it in Cow County, USA. Milk that kept Waukesha on top of the world, or so said this 1927 dairy show display. Now, this display is coming from one of the shows held at Waukesha County's Dairy Pavilion. It was located in the city of Waukesha, but but one of the things I really enjoy about this display is that it gets at some of the diversity, really, of what it meant to be Cow County, USA, that you have milk for the baby, as well as milk for grown-ups, that there is a diversity of product implied. It's not just about milk for direct consumption. There are specialty milks, certified milk, Enzalac, never mind butter and cheese, and ice cream as well. Cow County, USA, Waukesha County was not just about one single aspect of dairying. It was about encompassing all of the aspects of dairying, concentrated in one very specific area. Now, I mentioned at the start, we did not give ourselves this nickname. It was bestowed upon us. On the left, you see actually an advertisement coming from Kimball's Dairy Farmer in July of 1919. They ran a two-part story. The first part of the story was on July 1st, and this ad appeared alongside it as a teaser that the editor surmised a trip to Wisconsin taken by a world travel dairy expert who reported back to Kimball's Dairy Farmer that they were struck by one particular 24 square mile county of Wisconsin that was, to their mind, Cow County, USA, because in this one 24 square mile county, there were more cows concentrated geographically than anywhere else in the world. The little black tile you see was the only clue, other than knowing it was in Wisconsin, what county that was. The ad here then enticed folks to become subscribers as to find the answer to this ponderous riddle. That tile is supposed to be a representation of Waukesha County. It seems to me a bit Dolly inspired, perhaps. I kind of see a melting face going on. That might just be me. But the four kind of petal shapes in the upper left corner, the Lake Country region, the Fox River snaking through the middle, and then, of course, Muskego Lake in the southeast corner. So yes, indeed, it was revealed in the July 16th issue of the Dairy Farmer that Waukesha County, Wisconsin was Cow County, USA. If you were a resident of the county, though, and took the Waukesha Freeman, you would have gotten the scoop. The Freeman spoiled the surprise on July 10th. They announced the upcoming revelation of Cow County, USA. But I've also included here some numbers, because it was not just one anecdotal assessment, albeit from a very reputable source, the Dairy Farmer, that gave us the moniker. Summarized here is a economic impact chart from Wisconsin Dairying. It's bulletin number 120 that was published in 1931, but it's actually looking back at numbers from 1927. You can see that the state was divided into districts. In the first column, you see the total gross farm income for the year, and then broken out the gross income per farm, and then gross income per acre of farmland. At the bottom, I have added in the specific numbers then for both Milwaukee and Waukesha counties. And you can see, obviously, comparing in the first column is a bit unfair because trying to compare one county to groupings of counties, certainly a lower impact. Although just between the two counties, you can see the significant near $7 million difference between the economic impact for Waukesha County versus Milwaukee in 1927. Looking then across at that last column, the gross income per acre of farmland, relatively comparable and above the average for other regions in the state, where you see Milwaukee County at about just under $30, and then Waukesha County about 60 cents cheaper per acre of farmland than that. If you fold that per acre of land price, though, back into, but how many farms are there within each of our counties? Milwaukee County has just over 1,200 farms in the county. Waukesha County has 3,500 some farms in the county. It is, in some sources, said as much as 90% of the county land in these early decades, the 19 teens and 20s, is dedicated to farm use in Waukesha. And within Waukesha County, it is dairying that is the most profitable area to dedicate your farm. A couple of more visual representations then as to exactly what that output looks like. And I'm going to go for the right map infographic first here. So this lays over a pie chart for each of the counties where the gross farm income is coming from milk, from livestock other than milk, that including livestock sales for sire and dam, so for your breeding stock, and then finally in crops. Looking at the Southeast region then, Waukesha County and Milwaukee County, there you can see for Waukesha, nearly 2/3 of the gross farm income coming from milk, about a quarter then from livestock other than milk. The relative size then of the pie chart indicative of the relative economic impact then, what that total gross value is in dollars. The other chart then is reflective of the fact that for Waukesha County and Milwaukee County as well, the milk production is not necessarily going into cheese as it is in more of the northern and western parts of our state. It is going into what is called city market milk. And that gets at a significant change in dairy in the early 20th century, because as people are moving into cities and out of countries, livestock is being forced out of cities and into the country. Your dairy cows are no longer permitted in many instances to be in city. Never mind the unsanitary conditions should you try and keep a milk cow nearby. And so for those who are looking to have milk as a beverage, you've got to start shipping it in. And this is a radical change in the 20th century, this idea that milk, a product of nature, has to be manufactured into the home. And by manufactured, I mean it has to be collected and processed. Pasteurization has been introduced as a process to help assure the quality of milk. In Waukesha County, we also see a number of producers, Pabst Farms, along with Brook Hill Farms, major leaders in certified milk production. Certified milk had to be kept at a consistent temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit or below in order to be officially certified milk. And so all of these things are getting at the change in how milk is being consumed in the country. One of the other significant pieces of understanding for dairy farmers in this era, and Fred Pabst is part of this movement, is again the quality of your breeding stock. The healthier the animals, the more likely it is that your milk quality is going to be better. In 1916, 1917, the city of Waukesha gets a lovely new addition, a sales pavilion, so that the farms of Waukesha County have a dedicated space to buy and sell their stock animals, their breeding animals. This image here coming from the late 1920s, early 1930s. Part of why I know that year, and a little tangent in investigating this photograph, some of you may recognize that the home of our organization, the Waukesha County Historic Society, in the background there, the historic courthouse for Waukesha County. The side of that courthouse building is exposed because the connector building does not exist yet. And so it's the western side of the building that today is covered by the connector that will ultimately linked to the jail that you see peeking across the dairy pavilion then. But the dairy pavilion sat right along the Fox River. If you can imagine, just off of the right edge of the image then would be the Barstow Bridge. For folks who know the city of Waukesha today, Discount Liquor is right along that bridge route that the Dairy Pavilion otherwise is occupying part of that space. It's an apartment complex, unfortunately, today, but the Dairy Pavilion became the center of activity. One of the first significant sales in that space was a 2-month-old calf from the Pabst Farms, sold in 1919 for more than $15,000. Pabst creation. A quick view of the interior of that sales pavilion. This an image of one of the auctions taking place. Again, I tried to find an image of a Holstein cow. I cannot guarantee that is a Pabst Holstein cow, but it's a better chance than not. But the other thing notable in this image is the mural that was in the sales pavilion. It showed the 4 breeds that Waukesha was, quote unquote, most known for. In addition to Holstein, and you can see the Holstein cow there on the right of the mural, the other 3 breeds were Ayrshire, Guernsey, and Brown Swiss. Guernsey in particular, it was documented in the 1920s that there were more Guernsey cows in Waukesha County than in the Isle of Guernsey that the line originates from. Again, that moniker Cow County, USA is not earned just on one breed line, it is earned across breed lines. Jersey cattle were also raised on some of the farms in the region, but again, those 4, the Ayrshire, Brown Swiss, Guernsey, and Holstein, featured there in the sales pavilion mural. Couple more images out of the sales pavilion. Again, a Holstein show here. The Dairy Pavilion hosted in March of each year throughout the 1920s a dairy show. It was the main agricultural fair for the county during that time. There was not a separate county fair because of the role that the Dairy Pavilion really played and the prominence of dairy as the main agricultural pursuit. And also the fact that there were multiple dairy breeders associations helping to sponsor those events. The other detail that is really lovely in this image, in the upper right corner, you can make out the top line at least of 2 broadsides that purebred sires paved the way. Again, the role of husbandry and strong breeding programs was understood to be some of the strength of Waukesha County's dairy industry. Sales photo. This one too, as you investigate the faces in the crowd, one, you can see that a couple folks knew their picture was being taken. The young man kind of in the center row looking up and over his shoulder at whomever's taking his photo image. I also really enjoy on the stage or in the auction ring, you have a woman in her fur coat. And it really captures the wealth and value that the dairying industry brought into the economy here in Waukesha, and why it was that Fred Pabst really honed in on the value of the Holstein herd to dedicate his farm pursuit to. That you have this mash of the pristine fur coat and her nylons on her heels in the middle of a auction ring with livestock, a dairy dam in front of her. Again, the breeders associations really help to create the foundation for the success of the multiple herds in the county. The main ones listed here. They also sponsored picnics for the farms throughout the region. The panoramic photo there at the bottom, I've broken out then on the next few slides so you can get a bit of a closer look at their faces. The other image here in that car are officials for the Guernsey Breeders Association. One of the other significant advancements during the 19-teens and 20s and 30s was creating the kind of rubric by which to judge the various breed lines. Fred Pabst Jr. was very involved in the Holstein Breeders Association, both locally and nationally. He actually commissioned an artist to create models of what a Holstein sire and Holstein dam should look like, what their conformation should be, their proportions, so that they would have a standard example by which to judge Holstein herds across the country. In 1920, Waukesha County herd examples took 5 of 6 of the national champion titles at the National Dairy Show. Again, the county became the standard bearers for what these various breeds should be throughout the country. And for Fred Pabst and Pabst Farms, they helped set the bar for what a Holstein herd should be and look like. But as I said, I'm going to show you some of the people behind all of this work. The picnics were really the opportunities where you could get everybody on the farm together, because it's not just one person leading all of the work. It is dozens, if not hundreds of people dedicating their time to these efforts. I always love, too, the kids at the front rows of these photographs. This particular picnic, August 1930, it is the Guernsey Breeders Association picnic at the Pabst Farm. I also, too, love looking at all the hats and kind of the best dress that some of the ladies have. The last section of this picture then was the entertainment for the picnic. The Wisconsin Industrial School for Boys, which was located here in the city of Waukesha, was invited out to the picnic to provide the entertainment for the day. This image coming from a picnic of the Holstein Breeders Association, and apparently they awarded the cutest baby at the picnic. This photograph that just came up is captioned "Winner of the cutest baby at the Breeders' Picnic." So I thought I would give them a little more acknowledgement near 100 years after they won such an honorific. Other significant farms, though, in addition to Pabst Farms, Keystone Farms, seen here, about 1925. Brook Hill Farms, which I mentioned. Brook Hill was also a leader in some of the scientific breakthroughs in treatments for various diseases that could be passed from cow into milk and then onto human. Warren Farms, seen here, to name just a few. Now, even though milk was the primary output, there were some cheese factories that were in the county. You can see a timeline here, though, of the relative decline of cheese factories over the course of the first half of the 20th century, from a height of 19 factories in 1891 to just a single cheese factory in 1965. But I did want to note one significant exception. In 1930, we see a decline of 12 down to 5, but there's one new addition cheese factory between 1914 and 1930. And that's the Pabst cheese factory. During the dry spell, Prohibition, Fred Pabst returns to the brewery. He and his brother Gustav go through a number of negotiations about how to contend with the real estate holdings and the brewery and whether or not to move forward. And that is another presentation for another day unto itself. But Fred Pabst steps back into the brewery, even though beer is now no longer permitted. And ultimately, it is the production of cheese made possible by his having established one of the leading Holstein dairy herds in the country. He had started investing in Swiss cheese production, and then in the 1920s and 30s shifted to producing what we would call more of a shelf-stable cheese or a spreadable cheese, as to help get the company through Prohibition. Pabst is launched as a brand name in 1926, if I'm remembering correctly. They did some initial market testing in Youngstown, Ohio, and in the tri-state or tri-city area around Rockville, Illinois, if I'm recalling correctly. But Pabst was a whole line of different cheese types. So it wasn't just one single. You can see here in the advertisement, these coming out of UWM Library Special Collections, that there was a pimento variety and a Swiss variety and a brick variety. And so really it is Pabst Farms that helps assure the continuation of the Pabst brand name in the Pabst brewery. I'm going to go back one slide real quick here. The other significant company that we know Fred Pabst worked with in terms of processing the milk that his dairy herd did produce was the Carnation Milks Product Company. They relocated from their main headquarters in Washington State to Oconomowoc, Wisconsin, in order to be nearer to County, USA, to some of the highest production milk herds in the country. And we know that Fred Pabst did work and have contract with the Carnation Milk Products Company as well. At times, it seems for his farm, the fact that they produced the high volume of milk they did was almost incidental to their true goals for the farm. But part and parcel when you are raising a Holstein dairy bloodline. Again, I wanted to return back, grounding us here where the Fred Pabst farm is. Overlaid here is an aerial photograph from 1941, and I've identified on there where the 7 different farm sites are. If you recall from the map previous, the TMER and L line, you can kind of still see where it jags through, just jumping back real quick, jags through the farm properties. But as you can see, each of the farms, that center of the property is really left undeveloped as the looks from this photograph. But in truth, it was Fred Pabst implementing new techniques in farming. He would plant corpses of trees, rows of trees, in order to help prevent wind from eroding the soil when the fields were not in active use. Also significant pasture land for his farms. In the 1940s, then Fred continued very actively with the farm. You can see him meeting here with representatives from Mexico who were looking to incorporate new dam or female line into some of the herds in Mexico. And then on the right, you can see them looking over one of the heraldry charts, one of the bloodline charts for the dam that they were otherwise examining. But there were several unfortunate incidents for the farms in the 1950s. This image coming from one of the last very successful dairy shows hosted at Farm Number 1 at Pabst Farms. This was the summer of 1956. In January of that year, there had been a significant barn fire, likely caused by spontaneous combustion in one of the hay lofts in one of the barns. That really significantly set back the farm operation. There was also an accident where one of the silos at one of the other farms collapsed, killing one of the staff at the farm. And two, by this point, Fred Pabst was getting on into his later years, and he had really stepped back. In 1949, he had appointed, or one of his sons had taken over really as president for the farm, running the day-to-day operations then. And ultimately, the Pabst herd did not make it past 1964. The herd was sold off in 2 significant auctions. The first, what's sometimes called the foundation sale, in October of 1963. 108 head of Holstein were sold for $81,000. More than 1,000 people attended that sale. The second sale, and this headline comes from the second sale, was the complete dispersal sale. October of 1964, 158 heads sold, 10 of those being bulls or sires. That second sale raised $138,000. The farm did not shut down entirely, though. There were still a few head of dairy cow, although they did shift to more cash crop soybean. There was actually kind of a dry, some of the milk production and drying operation transitioned to soybean, and they worked with Kinkoman to dry soybeans, then for soy sauce production, as well as with the smaller dairy herd, some dried milk products. Other significant factors, though, that led to the demise of Pabst Farms was the interstate project. Interstate 94, you can see here that bright white line. In this image, it is bisecting two of the lakes that were otherwise at the edge of the farm, the Pabst Farm property. If you can imagine in this aerial photograph, just at the bottom where the photograph cuts off would be the beginning of the Pabst Farm property. Interstate 94 essentially cut off part of the farm property. Despite efforts, the Pabst family could not prevent that right-of-way from cutting through the land. Today, the Pabst Farm name does still exist. It's become real estate development for residential as well as commercial purposes. So the Pabst Farm name is not gone from the land. And there's still folks who well remember the farm, again, did continue, although its role as a leading dairy farm did diminish after that herd dispersal sale. It was a place where folks would go and visit and certainly learn of the long-held traditions of large-scale farming in Waukesha County. So with that, I will get John back on here.
I'm in. That's fascinating. I've always, wondered the history about that. Not being originally from the area, and you go out, on 94, and you cross the signs, and you're like, oh, it's the home improvement stores now.
Yeah. The farm fleet is there now.
You're right, exactly. So right now is your chance to ask Bonnie any questions you might have about the presentation. We did get a couple of questions through that I'll start with.
I don't know the answer to.
Well, let's go with the first one.
Okay.
Are any of the amazing structures still standing at Pabst Farms? There's some people that chimed in, but I didn't know if you, as the historical authority, might know.
No. I believe there are some, but not significant.
Okay. So here's another one. I'm going to stump you on this one, probably.
Oh, please.
Let's see. That's not the right one. Somebody commented really quick. How many active dairy farms?
I don't know this one, but Kelly, we can find this out. I don't know the answer to that one right now.
There are still dairy farms in Waukesha County, I'd have to imagine. It's kind of,
but not as many. The other factor, and the Pabst family, Fred Pabst cited this as well, was the rise of artificial insemination in dairying. That the success of Pabst Farms really was the breed line, and that was true for other farms as well. With the rise of artificial insemination, you saw smaller herds, and so your milk production goes down because you don't need to have as diverse a herd in order to produce those strong breed lines. And so it's kind of a self-fulfilling cycle of you see a decline in dairy because we're changing how we're maintaining the herd through breeding program.
Sure,
but
that makes sense.
Like Brook Hill Farms didn't have any bulls left on the farm by 1948, and that was by design. They shifted to artificial insemination exclusively.
Right.
Somebody said 7. John Pabst Jr. Oh goodness.
I know. When you have a Pabst in the conversation, you trust that, right?
I will say I am yet learning about everything. So if anybody has corrections, bring it on.
Michael, here's one. What's the most famous animal bred?
That is a really good question. Depends on the circles that you're talking to. So there are a number, and I deliberately did not get into the kind of bloodlines because there's a lot of naming convention and
Sure.
it gets confusing quickly. I will say, if you do want to know more, because otherwise I'm just going to get on the weeds and all these specifically named sires and dams, the Pabst Farm book, History of a Model Farm, goes into some of the detail on those. I'd say kind of ones that stick out for me, Pabst Creation, the Creation line is a strong bloodline, and there are a number of well-known stock out of that line.
Sure. All right. Well, I think it's time to enjoy a Pabst product. If you don't, yeah, right. If you can, I wouldn't recommend if you found Pabst cheese to crack that open and eat it at this point.
No.
But I always like the Pabst ads because it's not necessarily cheese; it's cheese food, which is a different. Yeah. It's like it is Velveeta, right? Yeah. So coming up at the Pabst Mansion in a couple weeks, we have April 8th. John Eastberg's will be doing Captain Pabst Beyond the Brew House. So we hope you can join us for that with the Milwaukee County Historical Society. And another plug for Bonnie's exhibit.
Thank you.
That's 100 is a lot. So make sure you go by and enjoy that, because some of those things I doubt are on display all too often.
Yeah.
So, what?
I'm still looking at questions popping up.
Oh yeah, but if you have any questions, Bonnie will go through. Don't worry. But thanks everybody for tuning in tonight, and we'll be back again on April 8th. And if you want to know more about Pabst Mansion, just go to pabstmansion.org. And Bonnie, if you want to plug your website real quick.
Yeah, Waukesha County Museum.org or our letters WCHSM.org. Both will get you to us.
Awesome. Well, hopefully everybody can make it everywhere. And then, like I said, the Pabst Mansion will be reopening soon. So stay tuned for that. And we'll all be together again soon. So take care, everyone. And we'll see you again.